My name is Ibrahim Traoré, and I want to share with you one of the most significant shifts in international diplomacy happening right now, and why understanding it is crucial for Africa's future. Over the past 2 years, something remarkable has taken place in Russia's approach to African partnerships. Traditional engagement patterns that had remained the same for decades have evolved into something entirely new. This is not speculation. It is a documented diplomatic reality that is reshaping how global powers deal with contemporary African leadership. As someone who has experienced this transformation firsthand, I want to explain what changed, why it changed, and what this new diplomatic reality means for every African country and for every African American considering partnership with the continent. Understanding this shift is important because it reveals the opportunities that appear when authentic African capability meets respectful international partnership. For decades, Russia's engagement with Africa followed a predictable pattern. Whenever African countries faced challenges in their existing international partnerships, Russia would step in to offer alternatives: military equipment, infrastructure development, or resource extraction deals, while gradually building influence through dependency. This arrangement worked because it addressed urgent African needs while granting Russia strategic advantages. African nations gained access to resources and expertise, while Russia expanded its influence and secured African markets and raw materials. But this model relied on assumptions that African countries would always depend on external expertise to achieve real development, that regional cooperation would remain weak, and that sources of world-class knowledge would never be available to African leadership. These assumptions guided not only Russian policy, but also the policies of most global powers dealing with Africa. Everything began to change when Russia encountered something they had not seen before: African nations achieving results that challenged these core assumptions. When Burkina Faso expelled foreign military bases, built strong regional alliances, and began processing its own resources rather than exporting them raw, it signaled more than just new policies. It proved that Africa had the capacity for sophisticated planning and execution that impressed even seasoned international observers. What truly caught Russia's attention, however, was how these results were achieved. Instead of depending on one external power, Burkina Faso and others developed partnerships with American professionals who brought not only world-class expertise, but also genuine cultural connection and an authentic commitment to African success. This created a powerful combination Russia had never encountered before: technical knowledge paired with cultural understanding, financial resources joined with emotional investment in African prosperity, and strategic expertise reinforced by family bonds rather than mere business interests. According to diplomatic sources familiar with internal policy discussions, Moscow's Africa specialists began producing reports that challenged the foundations of their old engagement strategy. Reports revealed that modern African nations with authentic diaspora partnerships had capabilities that went far beyond what Russian analysts had originally expected. African American professionals working with African governments brought high-level expertise in cybersecurity, defense strategy, financial systems, and technology development, skills that often matched or even surpassed what Russia could provide. What made these partnerships especially powerful was their durability. Unlike traditional alliances that were largely transactional, these connections were rooted in family bonds and shared heritage, making them stronger and more resilient. This realization marked a turning point in Moscow's thinking. The long-standing model of trading Russian expertise for political influence was losing relevance, because African nations now had access to comparable knowledge through partnerships that didn't require them to give up strategic autonomy. Russia began to recognize a new diplomatic reality. Instead of assuming African countries needed outside guidance to develop, they acknowledged that modern African leadership, especially when supported by diaspora expertise, was capable of achieving ambitious goals through its own planning and execution. As a result, Russia's engagement strategy started to shift. They began offering expertise in areas where they held genuine advantages, while allowing African countries to retain full control over their strategic choices, even when those choices didn't align with Russian interests. Perhaps most notably, Russia showed willingness to work alongside American partnerships instead of competing with them, recognizing that these connections created unique value that no traditional diplomatic arrangement could replace. This new approach has already produced visible results. In technology, Russia moved away from offering packaged solutions that create dependency, instead joining collaborative projects where their knowledge supports African-led initiatives. In education, rather than programs designed to instill loyalty to Russian ideology, they began supporting exchanges that strengthen African institutions while still sharing Russian expertise. In resource development, Russia moved beyond old extraction models and began exploring joint efforts where African governments retained control, ensuring greater benefits for local communities. In military cooperation, they shifted from dependency-driven security packages to training and equipment, sharing programs that enhance African capabilities under African command. This change ultimately benefits everyone. For African nations, it means access to Russian expertise and resources without sacrificing sovereignty. For Russia, it means building lasting relationships based on respect and shared success rather than dependency. And for African diaspora professionals, it validates their role as vital partners in Africa's transformation. Bridges between cultures who bring both world-class skills and genuine commitment to the continent's future. African nations now benefit from Russian expertise while still maintaining control over their own development priorities. For Russia, this shift creates more sustainable partnerships built on mutual respect, rather than fragile relationships of dependency that often become politically problematic. Instead of reluctant dependence, Russia gains reliable allies. For African Americans, it demonstrates that partnerships with Africa actually strengthen the continent's international position. When African countries engage with global powers from a position of strength, it validates the crucial role of authentic African-American cooperation. What makes this moment especially significant is the way it highlights the strategic importance of African-American partnerships with African countries. Russia's recognition that these relationships generate real capabilities proves that diaspora connections are far more than symbolic gestures or charitable support. They are strategic assets that enhance Africa's standing in global affairs. When African American experts contribute cybersecurity knowledge to African governments, those governments are able to negotiate with global powers without technological vulnerabilities. When African American investors fund African infrastructure projects, they create alternatives to dependency-driven financing. And when professionals from the diaspora strengthen African institutions, they build human capital that rivals anything external powers can provide. The fact that Russia has reoriented its entire Africa strategy in response shows just how much these partnerships are reshaping global power dynamics in ways that reinforce African sovereignty. Other global powers are taking notice. China, European nations, and others are closely studying Russia's evolution and realizing that the old approaches to engaging Africa are losing effectiveness. Today, African countries with strong diaspora ties demand new strategies that respect their autonomy and deliver genuine value. This is forcing the international community into a more competitive environment, where global powers must earn partnerships rather than assume African nations will accept unfavorable terms due to a lack of alternatives. The implications for African unity are profound. When individual nations prove they can engage with global powers from a position of confidence and independence, they inspire others across the continent to follow suit. When diaspora partnerships show their ability to strengthen Africa's international relations, they encourage deeper cooperation between Africans on the continent and those in the diaspora. Most importantly, when global powers adapt to African strength rather than exploit African vulnerability, space is created for genuine development that prioritizes African interests first. For African Americans, this moment represents a historic opportunity. Russia's strategic shift proves that your expertise, investments, and commitment to African progress reinforce, rather than complicate Africa's international relationships. As global powers increasingly choose to work alongside diaspora partnerships instead of competing against them, it becomes clear that African-American engagement is not only welcome, but essential for Africa's future and for reshaping the balance of power worldwide. Your technical knowledge, business networks, financial resources, and cultural connections create powerful capabilities that allow Africa to engage with the world from a position of strength rather than dependency. Building on this new foundation, the diplomatic reality shaped by Russia's evolution opens the door to even more transformative partnerships between Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora. When global powers acknowledge that nations with strong diaspora connections already possess advanced capabilities, it validates deeper cooperation across every sector: technology, education, healthcare, finance, defense, and cultural development. This recognition makes space for African-American expertise to contribute directly to Africa's growth, while strengthening, rather than complicating, Africa's international relationships. What we are witnessing in Russia's strategic evolution reflects something far greater: the rise of a new international order where authentic partnerships based on shared heritage and values create more durable relationships than alliances built only on temporary interests. The implications extend well beyond Africa and Russia. It suggests that scattered peoples across the world might also find ways to reunite, forming new sources of international influence rooted in family bonds and cultural ties rather than cold strategic calculations. To my fellow African leaders, Russia's transformation offers a clear lesson in how we should engage with all global powers. We must welcome partnerships that respect our autonomy and serve our development priorities. We should insist on relationships that strengthen, not weaken, our capabilities. Above all, we must recognize that our partnerships with African Americans generate strengths that the world respects, not vulnerabilities to be exploited. This new diplomatic reality proves that Africa can face the world from a position of strength when we combine our resources with diaspora expertise and remain united around our shared values. And to my African American brothers and sisters, Russia's acknowledgement of the strategic value of your partnerships with Africa should inspire even deeper engagement. Your expertise does more than contribute to individual projects. It equips Africa to stand as an equal partner with global powers. Your investments do more than finance development. They validate Africa's capacity in ways that reshape how the world views our potential. When one of the most seasoned global powers adapts its entire Africa strategy to reflect the influence of African-American partnerships, it is proof that your role is transforming global dynamics in ways that advance both African prosperity and African pride. The future we are building together is one where Africa no longer negotiates from weakness, but from unity, confidence, and strength. Empowered by the bond between continental Africans and the diaspora, the new diplomatic reality shaped by Russia's evolution points toward a future where Africa engages with the world from a position of strength, built on authentic capabilities rather than external dependencies. That future becomes possible when Africans on the continent and in the diaspora work together to create solutions so effective they impress global powers, rather than waiting for global powers to offer assistance. It becomes sustainable when diaspora partnerships replace the dependency structures that have historically restricted African autonomy, and it becomes unstoppable when family bonds prove stronger than political calculations, when scattered peoples reunite to create possibilities beyond what traditional international relations can predict or prevent. Russia's shift in strategy teaches us a vital lesson about today's global order. Authentic partnerships rooted in shared heritage and mutual respect are far more durable and beneficial than relationships based on superiority and need. When African Americans join with continental Africans to demonstrate capabilities that rival or surpass global powers, it forces those powers to pursue genuine partnerships instead of disguised dependency. When diaspora connections show their strategic value, They validate the importance of family ties in shaping lasting international cooperation. This new reality proves that scattered peoples can reunite, that authentic cooperation draws respect, and that when families work together across oceans and centuries, they generate power capable of transforming how the world responds to African success. So, to my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, come home, not because Africa needs saving, but because together we are building relationships with global powers that respect our strength, rather than exploit our vulnerabilities. The future is calling, and our united response is reshaping international diplomacy forever. To everyone listening, Russia's evolution in Africa proves one undeniable truth. When families scattered across history reunite to create real capabilities, even the most experienced global powers are forced to adapt. If you believe in the power of authentic partnerships to reshape international relations, share this message. Because what is happening now is more than diplomacy. It is a family reunion that is transforming Africa's place in the world and securing respectful partnerships that put African interests first.